The Los Angeles Chargers have completely overhauled their team since missing the playoffs last year. We're going to talk about what they've done, how that might impact their strategy, and oh, by the way, today, in late-breaking news, they might add a sixth new defensive starter. Good morning. I'm James. This is your daily dose of sports and snart for the greatest sports city in the world, Los Angeles. This is Faithful Angelenos. It is March 5th, 2022. It is a glorious morning. Happy to be alive. Hey, we added a bunch of new subscribers yesterday. Thanks for getting in on the ground floor. If you like the content we've been putting out for the last couple of months, clickety-clack the like button. Clickety-clack the subscribe button. There's a notifications bell. Hit that. We put out a new video every morning. The notification bell lets you know it's there. Sharing is caring. Let people know we exist. And yes, comment. Because I'm not God. Don't know everything. We'll talk about the Chargers in just a moment. We want to get to the scoreboard and notes first. Last night at Chavez Ravine, the Dodgers beat the daylights out of the Giants 9-1. Mookie Betts, Max Muncy, they both hit home runs. LA sweeps their rival, and they're in first place in the NL West. Meanwhile, in the Stanley Cup playoffs, the Kings, they just didn't show up. Edmonton 6, Kings nothing. The series is tied at 1-1 with Game 3 in Crypto.com Arena on Friday. There are no games scheduled today for LA sports teams. Let's start off the notes by talking about the Lakers. They have asked and received permission to interview Raptors assistant Adrian Griffin. He is the second known candidate that the Lakers are going to interview, the other one being Milwaukee assistant Darvin Ham. In addition to that, and a side note, ESPN's Stephen A. Smith is saying that the Lakers should, quote, strongly consider trading LeBron James. In a related story, Stephen A. Smith needs to strongly consider a good proctologist to get his head out of his ass. You don't trade LeBron James. What are you talking about? What could you possibly... You've covered the NBA too long. You know damn well you're not going to get equal value trading LeBron James. Stop it. Meanwhile, former Lakers great Magic Johnson has joined a bid to buy the Denver Broncos, and I kind of don't care. Dodgers news, relief pitcher David Price was at the stadium yesterday. This matters. He had COVID. This means he's obviously healthy to be around people. He's not ready to pitch again, though. I mentioned clowning Stephen A. Smith because he's too emotional, I guess, and I'm starting to think that the LA Times is too reactionary, too emotional for my taste. Take Julio Urias, a starting pitcher. A couple of days ago, he pitches 6 shutout innings, low pitch count, and Dave Roberts comes in and pulls him. Why does this matter? Times writer Dylan Hernandez writes, "Oh, this proves the Dodgers do not trust Julio Urias." Really? But it's okay, it's the perfect call, according to the LA Times, that Clayton Kershaw gets pulled when he pitched 7 perfect innings in Minnesota. The perfect decision, according to Times columnist Bill Plaschke. So why is it a perfect idea to pull Clayton Kershaw, but palace intrigue when you pull Julio Urias? Right? You idiots have got to get your story straight before you start writing this sort of stuff. You sound like you're talking out of both sides of your booty. I'd say a lot worse, but I'm trying to keep it PG. News with the LA Galaxy. They have signed a left defensive back, Chase Gaspar. I shouldn't say signed, they acquired him. And the more accurate word, honestly, they bought him. That's what you do in soccer. You buy people. They sent about $500,000 to Minnesota United to go get him. The guess is that Jorge Villafana hasn't recovered from his knee surgery, and they're looking for a guy who can play the role until they figure out what to do from there. Galaxy have bigger problems in defense, though. Unfortunately, we don't have time to get into depth on that. And the reason is, again, we're going to talk a lot today about the Chargers. They had an extremely aggressive offseason through free agency, through the draft. They've done a lot of different things, and it's probably going to impact the way that they do things in terms of strategy. We're going to get to that. Some of these are just educated guesses. Feel free to tell me if you think I'm wrong. Now, the Chargers last year, on offense, we'll start with that first. they're going to have as many as 3 new starters compared with last year, which is why I did all this writing over here. Last year they had problems, most of which came from the right side of the offensive line. Austin Eckler, he could run that way effectively. You could blitz Justin Herbert from the right side. So how did they address that? Well, the first thing they did is they knew what they kept. The Chargers returned virtually all of their skill players, okay? Herbert is still going to be under center, obviously. Eckler is still your primary back, obviously. And their 3 wide receivers, they keep Allen, they keep Williams, they keep Gayton. There's a new tight end. They let Jared Cook go in free agency. They bring in Gerald Everett. We're going to talk about that because there may be a subtle tweak going on with that. And in addition to that, they're starting to juggle their offensive line. They love Slater at left tackle. He's fine. They love Lindsey, their center. He's fine. However, what do you do with left guard? Because you don't want to just create an even bigger hole on the offensive line. My belief is that they're going to take a Filer. People were originally thinking he was going to move to right tackle. What I've been reading, they're going to keep him in guard. They're just going to move him to the left side. So now you're looking at 2 holes on the right side of the offensive line. How did they address it? Well, they went out and their first round draft pick went to Zion Johnson. Boom, there's your starter. He's plug and play. Now what you're saying here is you have 4 people that the Chargers trust. 4 of the 5 offensive linemen they trust. Storm Norton, keep in mind, they let Brian Bulaga go as a free agent because he wasn't doing the job. So Storm Norton gets the first shot at being the right tackle. Now you might be saying there, okay, but can Norton handle it? What if he can't? Well, in my opinion, LA has to change its offensive scheme to try to protect Justin Herbert, to try to help Justin Herbert make quick decisions, to get rid of the ball quicker, and hopefully try and get Eckler some more running lanes. There are 2 ways that the Chargers have been able to do so with some efficiency in the past. The first thing they would do is they would bring in the 3 wide receivers. They would bring them in tight. Why does this matter? Because if you line up multiple receivers to one side, particularly tight against the offensive line, they could help block. And what also could happen is they could set up pick plays. You know, a receiver goes deep, somebody else cuts in underneath. That's a pick play. It's illegal, but you get away with it all the time in the NFL. This means Herbert has to make quick decisions to pass the ball and obviously not get hit, which, by the way, he's actually pretty effective at. So yeah, I think they're going to bring the wide receivers in a little tighter because it also changes what the opposing defense does. If you know that from the offensive formation that it looks like multiple receivers to one side and a possible pick play, you are less likely to run a press defense. Because if you press up against that, they run a pick, you've just had one of your own defensive players obliterated. And somebody gets wide open, super wide open. So you're less likely to press, you pull them back about 5 yards, and you're also less likely to run man-to-man defense. Same reason, you don't want them to get blown up. It would be an easy big play. So that means the defense winds up playing more zone. Also, if you watched all of the Chargers draft, you noticed in the 7th round that they took a fullback, Xander Horvath, and everybody was scratching their heads. Why would they do that? Fullbacks are not necessarily a big deal in the modern NFL game. And besides that, they have a guy that they kind of like in Neighbors. So what happens? So I was asking myself that. What if Horvath actually gives them more options than Neighbors? What if Neighbors is simply the odd man out because fullbacks aren't necessarily popular in modern NFL, and you need a fullback that can do more things? Well, what I've been reading about about Horvath in college is he might wind up playing H-back. H-back is a back that would basically line up behind one of the linemen to try to give him a little bit of extra help. He might wind up even playing a little tight end to give some blocking help, which means that Gerald Everett would get some help too to help protect Justin Herbert, or to help Eckler get an opening lane on the right-hand side. So I think that these are actually, in retrospect, I was curious about the Xander Horvath draft pick, but I actually think it could be potentially a smart decision if the Chargers play their cards right. Now the Chargers on defense, they line up in a base 3-4. But we'll get to what I think about what they're going to do with their defense in terms of the base alignment in a moment. They have rebuilt their defense on all three levels, most of which had to do with stopping the run. They were absolutely terrible in stopping the run last year. And I also believe that in addition to stopping the run, I think they're changing their defense much more also to maximize how they're going to play the Kansas City Chiefs. Stick with me. We'll get to it. We'll start with the defensive line. All the changes on the defensive line were basically a shot across the bow to put Jerry Tillery on notice. Mentioned earlier how bad the Chargers were against the run. Tillery was supposed to do that. Tillery was your nose tackle. He would theoretically line up opposite directly the opposing team center. Well, they went out and they signed Sebastian Joseph Day from the Rams. A lot of former Rams have gone to the Chargers because obviously their head coach used to be the Rams defensive coordinator. Now Joseph Day lines up over the opposing team center. Now I think Tillery's going to get playing time. I think he's going to start. But he's not starting at nose tackle. That's Joseph Day. He is a run-stopping specialist. And also you have Johnson coming into play. So you have revamped your front line. And oh, by the way, if there's an issue, if somebody needs a rest, in comes draft pick Otidio Ogbonnia from UCLA. Everything about that guy was about stopping the run. He was so big and so effective. He doesn't make the tackle. He eats up multiple blockers. And what that allows is it allows the linebackers to go make plays behind the defensive line. He will give the chance for middle linebackers to make the tackle. But let's talk about the linebackers, because they did address that. Yes, they keep Nick Bosa at one end, and as we all know, they made that big trade with Chicago. They bring in as another rusher on the opposite side, Khalil Mack. There's going to be lots of pressure, lots on the opposing quarterback. But what about the middle linebackers? Yes, they keep Tranquil. Yes, they keep Murray. But in late breaking news, Kyle Van Noy, a free agent who was a longtime New England Patriot, is meeting right now with the Chargers front office. What if he signs? He hasn't put pen to paper yet, but what if he does? Well, he's going to be your immediate starter. So either Murray or Tranquil are going to the bench. Here's where it gets interesting. What if both Murray and Tranquil go to the bench? Yeah, I'm arguing that the Chargers might wind up changing their base defense from a 3-4 to a 3-3. Because Van Noy can play the middle. He is a certain tackler. It's not that necessarily that they hate Murray and Tranquil, but those two gentlemen, unfortunately, are the weak links in the middle in the linebacking crew. If you do that, remember, to beat the Kansas City Chiefs in the Super Bowl, Tampa Bay went to a funky defensive alignment. They didn't play a traditional 4-3 or 3-4. They had two down linemen, a couple of linebackers, and a flood of defensive backs. What if the Chargers now have the players to do the exact same thing to take out the Chiefs? That's the team they're chasing in the AFC West. So yeah, I would actually argue that both Tranquil and Murray could wind up not playing as much as everybody thought if Van Noy signs. And that also means they would play a nickel. Look, in the defensive backfield, you're happy with J.C. Jackson, the signing from free agency. You're happy with Asante Samuel as your other cornerback. But Coach Brandon Staley, the former defensive coordinator from the Rams, likes to take a defensive back and he creates a new position called the star. The star is a defensive back that doesn't necessarily play man. He's not going to necessarily play zone. You could literally line him up anywhere to take out a tight end, to blitz the quarterback, to shadow the running back, any number of things. Jalen Ramsey excelled in all of it. So the question for me for a while was, who was the star position in the defense? Well, everything I've read suggests it's going to be safety Derwin James. Now, here's the problem. If you make Derwin James the star and put him anywhere, you now create a big hole in the middle of the defensive backfield. You can't have just one man, Adderley, covering deep middle all day. He will get gassed. He will get burned repeatedly. It's not that he's bad. It's just that you're asking him to cover too much ground. It's too risky. So in my belief, what the Chargers are going to wind up doing is they're going to put another draft pick, J.T. Woods, who they drafted from Baylor. Baylor is going to be helping Adderley, in my opinion. Woods is a schematic fit. Woods wound up playing a lot of deep zone when he played in college. He's 6'2". That's pretty much about as big as you want a safety to get. He's quick, so he can make a lot of plays. I think the Chargers are going to run a lot of 3-3-5 next year. Now, overall, when you look at the Chargers offseason, I think they solved a ton of problems that they had last year. And remember, this was a team that was only one play away from going to the NFL playoffs last year. They didn't suck. They just boosted a lot of places where they had questions. So they had bad run defense. Well, now you have Joseph Day. Now you have Obania and possibly Van Noy. They needed depth at running back. They took care of that. Over on the on the offensive side of the ball, they couldn't have Eckler running everything. They needed a backup running back, so they just decided to draft Isaiah Spiller, who rushed for almost 3,000 yards as a collegiate. And by the way, keep an eye on undrafted free agent Letty Bean of West Virginia, who ran for over 2,000 yards in college. Wasn't a perfect offseason though. Right tackle, we mentioned that. What if Van Noy doesn't sign? What about the inside linebacker? And of course, we mentioned tight end, unless Horvath develops as one, and edge rusher depth. What if Khalil Mack or Bosa get injured? Now, we went through a ton of Chargers info today. If you are a Chargers fan, I invite you to tell me what you think. Where do you think I might be wrong? I admit it. I'm not perfect at this stuff, but I think I'm onto something here. If you enjoyed today's episode, then thank you. By all means, like and subscribe. We're always looking to build our audience here, of course. I'm James. We'll be back tomorrow. Faithful Angelenos is a Quian Corta El Queso production. Take care.